Children of helicopter parents, what was the worst or most embarrassing thing they put you through? When I went away to college, my parents would call me every day. I went away to a fraternity weekend retreat during my freshman year where us pledges weren't supposed to bring our phones. I told my parents that I'm going away 3 days and not to call me. On the day we were coming back, the guy driving us got a call. He then hands me his phone and tells me to call my parents. It turns out that when my parent couldn't reach me for 3 days, they came to my college and went around my dorm and half the campus asking everyone if they've seen their lost little boy. I was 18 at the time. On top of that, since I was on their family cell phone plan, they looked up all the numbers I had recently called and texted. They proceeded to call everyone letting them know I'm lost and asking if they knew where I was. This included girls that I had crushes on but barely knew, random classmates, and mild acquaintances. When I got back to my worried parents waiting for me at my dorm, I found my cell phone with a bunch of messages of people asking if I'm okay and letting me know my parents are looking for me. For the next day, every 1 in 5 people I walked past would ask me if I talked to my parents because they were looking for me. My grandmother once did something similar to my dad, except he wasn't at a frat retreat. He was on a training exercise in the Air Force. When she couldn't get a hold of him, she called the base commander's office, then Washington DC. He got some crazy work detail, cleaning gum off the dumpster if I recall correctly, as punishment for his mom being nuts. My cousin had an interesting freshman year experience. She was roomed with another girl with a helicopter mother. The mother slept in this tiny dorm room with the daughter and my cousin for several weeks until she could convince the RA to kick the mother out. I had a field trip when I was 10 years old that I was very excited to go to. The morning of the field trip, my grandma picks up a call from the school saying that the trip was cancelled. I was delighted at the fact that I could play games all day, but disheartened at the fact that I missed out on my field trip. Next day comes and I go into class. I remember her asking the professor, when are we going on the field trip, since it was cancelled yesterday, and the professor just looks at me with this puzzled face, as if I was retarded or something. I end up finding out that my mom called my grandma and told her to act as if the school called my grandma and pretend that the school cancelled the trip. Apparently, my mom was afraid of the school bus flipping over and combusting into flames, while also there being a possibility of me being assaulted. Fire. Start assaulting the kids. My dad followed me into jury duty when I was 21 because he didn't believe I could do it myself. I insisted that he didn't come, but he did anyways. He was stopped by security guards outside the area and he threw a huge fuss about not being able to accompany me. Most of the courtroom was confused and weirded out. I didn't go to any school dance or sports event, so yeah, no prom, nothing. I was not allowed to go to the mall by myself when I was 19 years old. My dad would follow me around, like he'd walk about 5 feet behind me. When I was 20, I said I was going to get a cell phone and got into a big fight with my parents because they didn't want me to have one. I had been working since 15 and was going to pay for it myself, etc. I remember when I was 12 or so, my mom, little sister, 7 at the time, and I went to Costco to do some shopping. My dad showed up dressed as a clown. He used to dress up for birthday parties. Followed me and my little sister around honking his clown horn in our ears, yelling to all the guys that he was our dad. He still shows up at my work and tells my co-worker to tell me that my daddy is here to see me. I'm 31. I think the last time I called him daddy was when I was 7-8. Nobody calls him daddy. I work in an and I get sick and tired of helicopter parents bringing their offspring in for ridiculous reasons. He got a nosebleed a week ago, and again today. She's been having foot pain after pay, etc. The worst are the parents that bring their over 18 YO kids into the air because they want them drug tested. I love turning to the legal adult and asking, do you consent to this? The parent normally turns beet red and starts yelling at me about how they are the parent, and they pay the insurance, yada yada blah blah. At which point I remind them that their precious child is now an adult and without their child's express consent I cannot perform any tests on them. I've seen more than my fair share of light bulbs go off over the kid's head, and them flat out refuse all lab work. I tell them, alright, you heard him. I can't do anything. This normally ends in a call to the hospital administrator that will then tell them the same thing. I am also not allowed to give out any information over the phone, as I cannot verify you are the legal guardian, nor in the room without express permission. It's fun to watch people's veins throb when they can't get their way. My uncle hired a private investigator to follow my cousin to see if she had a boyfriend. She was 21 years old at the time. When I was engaged to my now husband, I was given many long lectures by my parents about how I couldn't lean my head on his shoulder or ever be alone with him because it would lead him to have uncontrollable urges which would then lead him to assault me, and it would be my fault for working him up. These lectures became daily and increased in absurdity. Glad my husband was able to stick it out. Things are much better now that I live with him on the other side of the country. My buddy had the worst helicopter mom. We were going to college 3 hours away from his hometown and ended up at a random after bar party with people we met just that night. His mom showed up. No idea how she found us. Walked in and grabbed him by the ear and dragged him out to her car. She then proceeded to drive him back to our hometown. The next day, she made him get a ride back to college with his former high school sweetheart he had recently broken up with. She did all this because mom didn't approve of the breakup. I wasn't allowed to hang out with girls when I was younger, and one day I was at the school park with some of my friends and there were a couple girls there too. My mom called me on the phone to ask who I was hanging out with. I only mentioned my guy friends. Well, apparently my mom was spying on me with binoculars. The park was just a few blocks from my house. As soon as she saw the girls, she drove to the park, got out and made a big scene about it in front of everyone, and made me go home. Not me personally, but I dated a guy in college who had the craziest helicopter parents. As a 20-year-old dude, he was not allowed to leave his condo that they owned. They lived about 30 minutes away and constantly called to make sure he was there. He was literally expected to go directly from class to home every single day. When we went out, for dinner, to the movies, etc., he had to use cash because his parents checked every single purchase on his bank statement and would question him about them. He wasn't allowed to drive, so he had to commute by bus to school every single day, about 45 minutes. One time we went to a summer concert in downtown and his mom called him. He ran out of the concert so he could find a quiet spot to talk to her, and then was so scared he made us leave the concert. The reason he put up with all this was because his parents were paying for everything: the nice condo he lived in, his tuition, etc. He had never worked a day in his life. Not sure what he's doing now, but I'm pretty sure they still have that hold on him. My mom would do random checks on my phone every couple days. Out of nowhere she'd ask for my phone and I'd have to hand it over. My parents also didn't believe in dating, they believed in courting. Because of that, I felt the need to keep all my relationships secret. One day she asked for my phone before I'd had the chance to delete any incriminating texts. I knew there were some steamy messages on there from my, so I handed it over knowing crap was about to hit the fan hard. I went and sat down, but I just couldn't handle it. I got up and walked right out the door. I was wearing my PJs still and hadn't put on shoes. I ran for a while and then started walking. Didn't realize I was crying until I slowed down. It took my parents about 20 minutes to find me. But hey, I ended up marrying the guy I was texting, so I've got that going for me. I was on leave from Iraq, turned 21 during that time period, and my parents still made me be home by midnight. I was a goddamn combat veteran and I needed to be home by midnight. Holy crap. Yes, I was home on leave after my Afghanistan deployment, also 21, decided against my better judgment to stay at my parents' instead of a hotel. First night back I was out late getting fricked up with some old friends from high school, and at 9 my dad started blowing up my phone telling me to get home. I just told him that home was Fort Huachuca, AZ, and I was on vacation. One time I went to the mall with my friends, which was very rare because I didn't often get to have friends. Obviously to get there my parents had to drop me off, so they drove away, but then an hour into our hangout session, which consisted of walking around the mall and me telling her jokes, it was fun, my mom texts me and asks where I am. I text her back and tell her I'm at the mall, where she dropped me off. She accused me of leaving and demanded I take a picture of where I am to prove I'm still there. Reluctantly I did. confiding in my date about my narcissistic mother for the first time to anyone. Telling someone about it felt good, until 5 minutes later she used a picture I sent her to find where I was and approach me. This is when I discovered she never actually went home and was following me around the mall the whole time watching what I was doing. She told me we had to leave right now because she was worried I'd run away and grabbed me by my arm to take me away, leaving my date there. My parents had this freaking tracking device activated in my cell phone. All throughout high school they knew exactly where I was. That is, until I'd leave the dang thing at the place where I told them I was going and go off wherever I wanted. My mother once drove to my workplace after school when I was 17 to check and make sure I was actually working. She then freaked out at me when I got home because she claimed I wasn't there, when really she just didn't drive all the way in the parking lot to avoid being seen since she drives such a distinct car. That was around her phase of thinking I was on hardcore drugs and sleeping with the entire male population of my town. I was an A+ student who worked every day after school plus weekends. Don't know when she thought I'd have time for all of that. I've been through that phase. My favorite example is the one day my dad went to my room and screamed at me, telling me to give him the drugs and come clean because he smelled that I was smoking. I was watching a movie and eating pizza rolls. I was a fatty. The neighbor's house was on fire. My parents called my trade school when I was freaking 19 years old to make sure I was attending. They didn't have a reason to suspect I wasn't going and they weren't the ones paying for it. I moved out very soon after. Monitored my internet activity and brought up the P I watched at the dinner table in front of my younger siblings and a friend who was over for dinner, and told me watching P would leave me morally depraved and difficult for anyone to love. I was 13. Don't watch it at the dinner table, mate. One of the more memorable experiences. When I was a freshman, my cousin was a senior and through him, I made a lot of friends that were upperclassmen. So at the end of the year, I got invited to go to prom. My parents made my date, who was just a friend, come over 2 weeks before prom and basically asked him every question imaginable. They got his phone number, home number, email, the works. He was super chill about it because my cousin had warned him beforehand. When prom actually came around, I wasn't allowed to ride in the limo with everyone else. Instead, my mom drove me in her ugly ass Astro van that looked like the Mystery Machine, and she had my siblings and cousins packed in there. When we got to the venue, she got off with me and asked an administrator if she could stay. Thank God he said no. Oh, and I had a curfew. 8:30 p.m. It was 7 when I got there. Your mom clearly thinks she is on a permanent escort mission. I have loved to write since I was very young. My mom had this weird obsession with going through my stuff, and one day, while I was going through her stuff, I found a crap ton of my writings. She read all my stuff and saved it. I felt incredibly violated. I threw everything away, which I deeply regret because I would have loved to read about my teen angst now that I'm going through my late 20s angst. One night I decided to visit my boyfriend at his apartment for some TV time and cuddles. I ended up restarting my phone and forgetting the turning it back on part. While cuddling in front of the television, I fall asleep. At around midnight, my mom calls and it goes straight to voicemail. Any logical person would just figure the phone died or just didn't have service. Very reasonable where I live. Not my mother. She called the cops and tried to report me missing, which ended with the police asking how long I had been gone. She responded with about 8 hours and they tell her to wait until morning. At this point it is about 1 AM and I am still asleep. We both are. Fast forward about 2 hours and my mother has called and woken up all of my friends hunting for me with no luck. She calls my best friend and she tells her that I am at my boyfriend's apartment. My mother now knows that I am safe and not missing. This is not enough for her though. She ends up coming to the apartment after pestering best friend enough for the location. My best friend doesn't know the exact apartment, so she just told her the complex name and went back to bed. I woke up at almost 4 in the morning to my mother banging on the door yelling persona blah anxious. Open the freaking door. I run thinking something is wrong and fling open the door to find her red, metaphorical steam is pouring from her ears. She yells for me to get in my truck and get home now. The next day when I went to visit my boyfriend and apologized profusely for what my mother has done, I discover that my mom had banged on every single door until she found the right one. I was 18 at the time. It didn't take much longer before my relationship ended. My parents weren't helicopter parents, per se. It was mainly my dad who was really strict only about movies. For example, when I was in high school, I asked if I could go to the movies with my friends. It was a G.I. Joe movie that I wasn't super into, but it was mainly to just do something fun. My dad said he wouldn't let me go unless I wrote a paper on the movie after I watched it about its redeeming qualities and Christian principles. G.I. Joe is a bad motherfucker. Praise Jesus. Mom read in my diary that I had lost my virginity to my BF at the time. She called my school's principal to tell him that he had assaulted me. I am still a teenager, so I'm still putting up with my parents' helicopter habits. My parents were furious when they found out I had watched The Hunger Games at a friend's house. Same thing happens whenever I watch a movie rated PG or above and they're not there to fast forward through the kissing scenes and mild cursing. They don't allow me to spend money without telling them first. I once bought a pack of gum without telling them. It wasn't pretty. Long story short, I got my phone taken away for a week after being chewed out for a solid hour. My dad has software on my phone that tells him whatever I do on the internet. This includes texting and calling. He'll probably see this, but I don't care. I'd better stop typing now. They might catch me. My parents used to email all my teachers on a daily basis to make sure I turned in all of my assignments on time. Most of my childhood is a fog, but I have memories of being in and out of doctors' offices all the time growing up. They often had me on multiple prescriptions. The doctors never really spoke to me. They'd speak to my parents and then I would take whatever pills or undergo whatever treatment I was instructed. This continued until I was 18. I still to this day have never been told what was up, and I have no access to early medical records. I'm 39 now and perfectly healthy with no ailments or health conditions that I am aware of. You have been visited by the Bapis doggo of good old times. Comment drink well doggo to get infinite Bapis. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day you magnificent people.